What if I told you America's greatest leap wasn't won on a battlefield, but inside a smoky factory? From the rise of machines to the fall of family farms, this is the true story of how the Industrial Revolution changed everything. And trust me, you won't believe how it all began. Imagine waking up to the sound of roaring machines instead of roosters, smoke rising above cities instead of the mist of quiet countryside mornings, and long lines of people entering factories instead of fields. This wasn't a scene from a dystopian novel, it was the reality of 19th century America. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how things were made, it rewired the very fabric of American life. It transformed towns into booming cities, replaced skilled artisans with mechanized labor, and gave rise to a new economic order that shaped the future of the United States. But how exactly did it happen? What sparked this wave of innovation, and at what cost? This is the epic story of the Industrial Revolution in America, a tale of invention, ambition, struggle, and transformation. In the late 18th century, the United States was still largely an agricultural nation. Most Americans lived in rural areas and worked as farmers. The economy was centered around small towns, handcrafted goods, and manual labor. But across the Atlantic, something incredible was unfolding. In Britain, technological breakthroughs like the spinning jenny, the power loom, and the steam engine had begun to revolutionize industry. This wave of innovation, known as the Industrial Revolution, was already altering the way people lived and worked, and soon it would leap across the ocean and ignite a revolution of its own in America. The first sparks of the American Industrial Revolution were seen in textiles. In 1789, a young Englishman named Samuel Slater secretly brought the designs of British textile machinery to the United States. At the time, Britain guarded its industrial secrets closely, forbidding the export of machines or blueprints. But Slater, often called the father of the American Industrial Revolution, memorized the plans and built the first successful water-powered textile mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. His work laid the foundation for the booming textile industry in New England. Soon, textile mills spread rapidly across the Northeast. These early factories relied on water power, so they were often located along rivers and streams. Entire towns grew around them, populated by workers who left farms behind for steady wages. Women, particularly young girls known as mill girls, became an essential part of this workforce. They lived in boarding houses and worked long hours under strict rules, but for many, it was their first taste of financial independence. But the Industrial Revolution didn't stop with textiles. The invention of the steam engine expanded industrial power far beyond water sources. Trains and steamboats began to crisscross the nation, revolutionizing transportation and connecting previously isolated regions. Goods could now be transported faster and cheaper than ever before. This new mobility helped open up the American interior, encouraging westward expansion and fueling economic growth. One of the most significant changes came in manufacturing. Before the Industrial Revolution, most goods were made by hand in small workshops. But with the rise of factories, production became faster, cheaper, and more efficient. Eli Whitney's invention of interchangeable parts revolutionized the production of everything from muskets to clocks. Instead of crafting individual items from scratch, factories began using standardized components, making repairs easier and mass production possible. The Industrial Revolution also gave rise to new industries, including iron, coal, and eventually steel. Pittsburgh became a hub for steel production, while cities like Scranton and Birmingham thrived on coal and iron. These industries were fueled by America's vast natural resources and the hard labor of immigrants, many of whom worked in dangerous conditions for low pay. Child labor was rampant, Kids as young as 8 or 9 worked in mills and mines, often in brutal environments. Long hours, hazardous machinery, and lack of education plagued the early workforce. Labor unions were still in their infancy, and workers had little recourse against exploitation. Yet even amidst the hardship, innovation soared. Inventors and entrepreneurs became the icons of the age. Samuel Morse created the telegraph, revolutionizing communication. Cyrus McCormick's mechanical reaper transformed agriculture. Elias Howe and Isaac Singer revolutionized clothing production with the sewing machine. And of course, Thomas Edison would eventually light up America with the invention of the incandescent bulb and the rise of electrical power. The rise of industry also reshaped American cities. Places like New York, Boston, and Chicago exploded in population. Immigrants from Europe poured into urban centers, looking for work and a better life. But these cities were often overcrowded, unsanitary, and dangerous. Tenement housing became the norm, with entire families crammed into small, poorly ventilated rooms. Disease spread rapidly. Fires were common, but the cities also offered opportunities and a sense of progress that rural life often lacked. With new wealth came new divisions. A powerful industrial elite emerged, men like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan. They built empires of steel, oil, and finance, amassing fortunes previously unimaginable. They were hailed as captains of industry by some and condemned as robber barons by others. Meanwhile, factory workers toiled in harsh conditions, often struggling to afford the very goods they produced. This growing inequality sparked the rise of labor movements. Workers began to organize strikes and demand better wages, hours, and working conditions. The labor movement gained momentum through the late 19th century, giving birth to unions like the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor. Though these movements faced fierce resistance from industry leaders and often violent crackdowns, they laid the groundwork for future labor reforms. The role of women in the workforce also evolved. While many still worked in traditional domestic roles, increasing numbers found jobs in factories, offices, and later, department stores. This gradual shift laid the foundation for the women's rights movements of the 20th century. Education and literacy improved as industrial cities required a more educated workforce. Public schools expanded, and higher education began to cater to the needs of the industrial economy. Land-grant colleges were established to teach science, engineering, and agriculture. American innovation was on the rise, and the country began to compete on the global stage. But all this progress came with consequences. The Industrial Revolution took a heavy toll on the environment. Forests were cleared, rivers were polluted, smoke from factories choked the skies. For the first time in history, human activity began to significantly alter the natural world. Despite the challenges, the Industrial Revolution laid the foundation for modern America. It turned the U.S. into an economic powerhouse and reshaped its identity from a rural nation of farmers to an urban industrial superpower. It gave us railroads, electricity, telegraphs, and eventually the foundation for the technological age. By the early 20th century, America had become a global leader in manufacturing and innovation. The assembly line, pioneered by Henry Ford, revolutionized not just the auto industry but all forms of production. Ford's Model T wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of American ingenuity and the power of mass production. Looking back, it's easy to marvel at the incredible achievements of the Industrial Revolution. But it's just as important to remember the human cost behind the machines. The long hours, the dangerous conditions, the sacrifices of immigrants and workers who built the country brick by brick, bolt by bolt. Today, when you flip on a light switch, drive a car, send a text message, or even watch this video, you are living in a world shaped by the Industrial Revolution. Its legacy is all around us, in our cities, our technology, our economy, and our very way of life. So if this powerful story of struggle and progress inspired you, give this video a like to show your support. Drop a comment sharing what surprised you most about America's industrial rise, or tell us what other chapter of history you'd love to explore. And don't forget to subscribe because the past is full of lessons, and the best way to understand the future is to first understand how we got here. Thanks for watching, and welcome to the story of America, one revolution at a time.